The galactic empire stretched across thousands of stars, binding entire civilizations under one banner. To most species in the galaxy, the empire seemed eternal, unshakable, and far too powerful to ever be challenged. Its laws reached every colony, its fleets filled the skies of countless worlds, and its rulers declared themselves the guardians of order. Few dared to resist, and those who did were swiftly crushed, their rebellion remembered only as a warning to others. At the heart of this mighty dominion was the Imperial Armada, the most powerful battle fleet ever assembled in the history of the stars. Each ship in the Armada was a marvel of engineering. War cruisers larger than cities, dreadnoughts carrying weapons strong enough to shatter moons, and carriers that launched endless waves of fighters. Together they formed an unstoppable wall of firepower, said to be unmatched by any known force in the galaxy. On the command deck of the flagship Eternal Glory, Grand Admiral Zealer stood with his hands clasped behind his back. Tall, stern, and cloaked in the dark silver uniform of the Empire, he was a man feared across systems. His eyes scanned the vast display screens showing the Armada as it prepared for launch. Hundreds of ships floated in perfect formation, their hulls glowing with power. The sight filled him with pride and with absolute certainty. "No enemy can stand before us," he said calmly. His officers nodded, some with awe, some with nervous smiles. They believed him because everything about the Armada made it easy to believe. The people of the Empire believed it too. On thousands of worlds, broadcasts filled the air. Citizens gathered in plazas and homes to watch the fleet's grand departure. They cheered, sang the anthem of the Empire, and held banners that shone under city lights. For them, the Armada was not just a fleet. It was proof that their empire ruled without question. And yet, in the middle of all this pride and power, there was a whisper, a rumor. Something small, almost laughable, but persistent enough that it reached even the ears of the Grand Admiral. The rumor spoke of a human ship. Humans were a minor species, at least in the Empire's view. They came from a single, unremarkable planet, Earth, a world with no advanced technology compared to the galactic standard. Their colonies were few and scattered, their fleets nothing more than civilian vessels refitted with light weapons. By all accounts, they were insignificant, no different from dozens of other small species the Empire had absorbed. But the rumor was strange. It told of a single human ship that had been spotted in border sectors. Imperial patrols had tried to intercept it, yet the ship always slipped away. It had outmaneuvered cruisers, avoided blockades, and in some reports destroyed ships that pursued it. Of course, most dismissed these tales as exaggerations. Some said it was pirates using stolen technology. Others claimed it was simply luck or cowardly tricks. Grand Admiral Zealer did not laugh at the rumor, though. He despised weakness and lies. To him, even a whisper of defiance was unacceptable. The Armada's launch was not only a show of power, it was a mission. His orders were clear. Find the human ship, crush it, and make an example of it before the entire galaxy. He turned to his officers and spoke with cold authority. The people must see the truth. They must see that the Empire fears no enemy, no matter how small. We will find this human vessel and we will erase it from existence. The officers bowed, repeating in unison, "Glory to the Empire." Far away across the black sea of stars, other fleets of the Empire had already failed to find the mysterious human ship. Records showed strange incidents, destroyed scout groups, missing ships, and confusing sensor readings. Still, the Imperial Council declared that these failures only proved the need for the Armada itself to act. After all, nothing could stand against the combined power of the Empire's greatest fleet. The Armada began its departure. Engines the size of mountains roared with controlled fury, propelling ships into the dark. Stars shifted around them as jump drives activated, sending the fleet across systems in minutes. From one world to another, they crossed like shadows, each movement watched by billions. For the people of the Empire, it was a spectacle of strength. For the enemies of the Empire, it was a reminder of hopelessness. On the Eternal Glory, Admiral Zealer stood at the center of the command deck, his gaze fixed on the main display. It showed their destination, a sector of space near the Empire's outer borders. This was where the human ship had last been sighted. "Bring us to readiness," Zealer ordered. "Weapons primed. Fighters on standby. I want every ship alert." The officers obeyed swiftly, their voices crisp as they relayed commands. Across the Armada, crews moved into action. Weapons hummed as power surged into cannons. Fighter pilots sealed their helmets, preparing to launch at a moment's notice. Zealer allowed himself a faint smile. To him, this was not war. This was discipline, order, and inevitability. The rumor would be silenced, and the galaxy would see the Empire's unbroken power. Meanwhile, beyond the edge of known charts, the Terran Resolve drifted silently through the void. It was a small ship compared to the giants of the Empire, humble in size, patched in places, and worn by countless battles. Yet within its steel walls, a crew of humans prepared themselves. Their captain, Elias Kane, stood at the bridge, watching the starfield with calm eyes. His ship's sensors were already tracking the movement of the Armada, even before the Empire arrived in the sector. He knew what was coming. He knew they would come for him, because that was the nature of empires. But Kane was not afraid. He had faced odds before. He had seen what humans could do when pressed to their limits. The Empire believed numbers alone brought victory. Kane believed otherwise. "The storm is coming," he said quietly to his crew, "and we will meet it." Back in the Empire's core, as the broadcast continued, ordinary citizens whispered about the human rumor. Some laughed, calling it nonsense. Others wondered just for a moment if it might be true. Could a single ship really stand against the might of the Empire? The broadcast showed Admiral Zealer making a declaration. "The Armada marches for glory. No shadow, no rumor, no insignificant foe will challenge us. The galaxy will see once more that the Empire is eternal." His words echoed across countless worlds, filling the hearts of loyal citizens with pride. But in the silence between those words, the rumor still lived. And far away, the human ship waited. The Armada approached the border sector like a storm cloud swallowing the horizon. Hundreds of ships shimmered into real space, their hulls reflecting starlight. The fleet moved in precise formation, ready for war. Zealer stood tall, his voice firm. "Signal the galaxy. Let them watch. Today the Empire will end this farce, and so, under the eyes of billions, the Empire's greatest fleet prepared to face what they believed was nothing more than a small, fragile human vessel. They did not yet know that this battle would become a story told for centuries. They did not yet know that the name Terran Resolve would burn itself into the memory of every species. The first chapter of the galaxy's greatest humiliation had begun. The Imperial Armada entered the border sector like a wave of iron and fire. Hundreds of ships appeared in formation, their drives glowing bright as they emerged from hyperspace. To the people of the galaxy, it was a sight meant to inspire awe and fear. The most powerful fleet in history was now hunting a single target. On the flagship Eternal Glory, Grand Admiral Zealer stood tall, his eyes fixed on the wide display before him. The sector stretched out in endless black, scattered with stars and drifting asteroids. His fleet scanned every corner with advanced sensors, searching for the human vessel. "Any sign of the target?" he asked calmly. The sensor officer bowed his head. "Negative, Admiral. Long-range scans detect only empty space. No fleets, no colonies. Just one object. Very small." Zealer raised an eyebrow. "Bring it up on screen." The display shifted. A small ship appeared at the edge of the system. It was barely larger than a corvette, dwarfed by even the Empire's light cruisers. Its hull looked old, patched with uneven plating, and its design seemed primitive compared to the sleek ships of the Armada. The bridge officers laughed softly. Some exchanged amused glances. Was this truly the ship that had caused such whispers? "Is that it?" asked Commander Dravik, the second in command. "That small craft is the ghost we've been chasing?" "It appears so," Zealer replied, though his voice carried no humor. He studied the little vessel, his instincts whispering caution. The human ship did not flee. Instead, it drifted forward slowly, as if waiting for them. Then, suddenly, a signal lit up on the communication board. "Admiral," the COMEM's officer said in surprise. "We are being hailed." By the human ship, the bridge went silent. Everyone turned to the Admiral. Zealer's lips curved into a cold smile. "Put it through." The display flickered and a human face appeared. A man stood on the bridge of the small ship, wearing a plain uniform with no markings of rank. His eyes were calm, his expression steady. "I am Captain Elias Kane of the Terran Resolve," the human said, his voice firm but controlled. "You are entering restricted space. Turn back now or you will be destroyed." For a moment, the bridge of the Eternal Glory erupted with laughter. Officers laughed openly, unable to believe the arrogance of this human. A single ship threatening the most powerful fleet in the galaxy? It was madness, but Admiral Zealer did not laugh. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Human, do you understand what you're saying? You stand alone before the armada of the Empire. You are nothing but dust before a storm. Surrender your vessel, and perhaps I will let your crew live. Kane's expression did not change. You underestimate us. Numbers do not decide every battle. I give you one chance to leave. Refuse, and the blame for what follows will be on your hands. The laughter on the bridge grew louder. Commander Dravik sneered. He's delusional, Admiral. Allow me to prove it. Let us send a detachment and crush that toy. Zealer gave a slow nod. Very well. 30 destroyers will advance. Teach this human his place, the order was given. 30 sleek destroyers broke formation and moved forward, their engines glowing as they spread into attack formation. Their captains were confident, even eager. To them, this was no battle. It was a chance to win favor in the eyes of the Empire by destroying a worthless target. The human ship remained still, drifting quietly in space. Target locked, reported one of the destroyer captains. Weapons primed, the signal was given. Beams of energy and volleys of plasma shot across the darkness toward the Terran Resolve. The entire bridge of the Eternal Glory watched, expecting to see the small ship ripped apart in an instant. Instead, the human vessel moved. It did not move like any ship they had ever seen. Instead of standard evasive maneuvers, it twisted sharply, cutting across angles that should have been impossible. Its engine trail flickered strangely as if bending space itself. The incoming fire missed completely, striking only empty void. Impossible, whispered one of Zealer's officers. Then the Terran Resolve fired a single pulse of blue-white energy shot forward. It struck the lead destroyer squarely in the center. In an instant, the destroyer vanished, consumed in a silent explosion. The bridge froze. The human ship fired again. And again. Within seconds, 3 more destroyers were gone. The surviving ships tried to counterattack, but their weapons never found their mark. The Resolve darted between their fire, warping unpredictably. Its weapons were few, but each shot was deadly accurate. In less than a minute, 30 Imperial destroyers were gone. Not one had survived. On the flagship, silence fell. The laughter was gone. The officers stared at the display in shock, unable to believe what they had just seen. Captain Kane's voice echoed through the comms. I warned you. Leave this place. Zealer's jaw tightened. He felt anger rising, but also something he had not felt in years. Unease. This must be some trick, Commander Dravik muttered. Perhaps stolen alien technology, or a hidden fleet waiting nearby. No, Zealer said slowly. His sharp eyes remained fixed on the human ship. There is no hidden fleet. That small vessel destroyed 30 destroyers by itself. The officers shifted nervously. Fear was creeping into their voices. What are your orders, Admiral? One asked. Zealer's voice grew cold. We are the Empire. We will not be shamed by a single ship. Prepare the next wave. 50 cruisers will advance. I want that vessel in pieces. The orders spread quickly. Across the Armada, 50 cruisers broke formation and moved to surround the Terran Resolve. Their hulls glowed with power, their weapons ready. They were faster, stronger, and heavier than the destroyers. Surely this time, victory would be swift. But Kane had already begun to move. The Resolve darted forward, weaving between the cruisers before they could lock on. It struck weak points with impossible precision, tearing through armor and igniting reactors. Cruisers exploded one after another, unable to even track the ship. The human vessel seemed to anticipate every move, every attack, as if it had already fought this battle 1,000 times before. Within minutes, the cruisers were gone. The battlefield was littered with wreckage, drifting silently through space. On the Eternal Glory, officers struggled to breathe. Fear now filled their eyes. Kane's voice came again, steady and calm. This is your last warning. Turn back. Admiral Zealer stood frozen for a moment. He had commanded countless battles, and he had never seen anything like this. A single human ship had destroyed 80 of his vessels without taking a single hit. But surrender was not in his nature. His pride, his honor, and the glory of the Empire demanded victory. He straightened and gave his next order with fire in his voice. Enough games. Prepare the fleet. We will crush this insect with our full strength. The galaxy will not see the Empire defeated by a single human. His officers bowed, though their movements were stiff with dread. The battle was only beginning. But already the Empire's invincible armada had met something it did not understand. On the bridge of the Terran Resolve, Captain Elias Kane watched calmly as hundreds of enemy ships shifted into attack formation. His crew looked to him, waiting for his command. "They still do not understand," said his first officer. "They will," Kane replied softly. His eyes hardened and his voice carried the weight of certainty. "Because humanity has always been underestimated, and today they will learn the truth." The human ship turned, its engines glowing brighter than before. Alone in the darkness, it faced the Empire's greatest fleet without fear. The first true clash between the Terran Resolve and the Imperial Armada had begun. The void of space burned with wreckage. Dozens of destroyed Imperial ships drifted silently, their broken hulls glowing faintly against the starlight. Pieces of shattered cruisers spun like dying embers, while the last echoes of explosions faded into silence. What had once been a proud formation of destroyers and cruisers now looked like a graveyard. At the center of it all floated the Terran Resolve, calm and steady, its small frame untouched. On the command deck of the Eternal Glory, fear gripped the officers. Never before had they seen anything like this. 80 Imperial warships had been lost in minutes to a single human vessel. The silence on the bridge was heavy, broken only by the steady hum of the ship's systems. Grand Admiral Zeeler stood unmoving, his expression unreadable. Inside, his pride burned like fire. The most powerful fleet in the galaxy had been humiliated. The thought of defeat was unthinkable. "They cannot be allowed to continue," Zeeler said at last, his voice cold as steel. "The galaxy watches. If we retreat, if we hesitate, the Empire's name will be tarnished forever." Commander Dravik swallowed hard but forced himself to speak. "Admiral, this ship, it fights in ways we cannot predict. Perhaps nothing," Zeeler snapped. His sharp gaze cut through his officers. "We are the Empire. We do not bend to fear. We will break this human ship no matter the cost." His words carried the weight of command, silencing every objection. But deep down, every officer knew the truth. This was no ordinary enemy. Orders spread across the fleet. Battleships moved into position. Carriers prepared to launch waves of fighters. The Armada shifted like a giant beast, readying itself for a strike that would erase the Terran Resolve from existence. On the human vessel, Captain Elias Kane watched their movements. His face remained calm, though his crew could feel the tension. "They're committing more ships," his first officer said quietly. "Dozens this time." "They're bringing the carriers," Kane nodded. "Then they've learned nothing." The crew shared uneasy looks. The Empire's numbers were overwhelming, but Kane had faced such odds before. Humanity's survival in the galaxy had never depended on numbers. It had depended on something else. Something the Empire had never understood. "Prepare the maneuvers," Kane said softly, "and make sure the power relays are ready. We will not fight them with strength. We will fight them with the one weapon we have always trusted, our will." The Empire struck first. Hundreds of fighters poured out of the carriers, swarming like a storm of steel. They rushed toward the Terran Resolve, firing streams of plasma and guided missiles. Behind them, battleships opened fire, filling the void with beams of deadly energy. The human ship darted into motion. Its engines flared, bending space in ways that Imperial sensors could barely track. It twisted between the attacks, turning impossible angles, always one step ahead. The fighters tried to follow, but their formations broke apart as the Resolve pulled them into traps. Missiles were redirected by clever countermeasures, slamming back into the fighters that launched them. The human vessel spun through the chaos, firing precise bursts of energy that cut through ships as if they were paper. One by one, the fighters fell. Then the battleships began to suffer. Kane ordered a sudden burn toward a nearby asteroid field. The Empire pursued, believing the human ship was fleeing. But in the dense cover of rock and dust, the Resolve turned the field into a weapon. It wove between asteroids with perfect control, while the massive Imperial ship struggled. Laser fire struck rocks, sending deadly fragments into their own formations. Entire cruisers collided with drifting stone, tearing their hulls apart. The crew of the Terran Resolve worked with precision, adjusting power, redirecting weapons, anticipating every move. It was not luck, it was experience, adaptation, and creativity. On the flagship, Admiral Zeeler's fury grew with every report. 30 fighters lost, 2 battleships down, More damage across the formation. The reports echoed like blows to his pride. He slammed his fist against the command rail. Enough of this. Press the attack.
Surround it!
Crush it. The officers obeyed, though their voices shook. Ships moved in from every direction, forming a deadly net. The human ship was fast, but against such numbers, escape seemed impossible. And yet Kane did not retreat. On the bridge of the Terran Resolve, he gave calm orders. Shift power to the aft shields. Prepare for a slingshot maneuver. The crew executed the commands quickly, though their hands trembled. The ship dived toward the gravity well of a nearby star, pulling the Imperial ships with it. The massive fleet struggled to adjust, but the human ship danced with precision, using the star's pull to sling itself around at impossible speeds. Imperial ships, too large and rigid, failed to match the maneuver. Several were dragged too close to the star's burning surface, their shields collapsing under the heat before they were swallowed whole. Others collided as their formations broke apart in the chaos. The Resolve shot out of the maneuver unharmed, while behind it, the Empire's formation lay in ruins once again. Back on the flagship, officers stared at the displays in disbelief. The mighty Armada, designed to be invincible, was being destroyed piece by piece. This cannot be real, one whispered. A single human ship is defeating the Empire's pride. Zealer's eyes burned. No, this is not defeat. This is a test of will, and the Empire's will cannot be broken. But in his heart he felt the shadow of doubt for the first time. The battle raged on for hours. Wave after wave of Imperial ships fell, destroyed by cunning traps, redirected fire, and maneuvers that no machine could predict. The Terran Resolve moved like a ghost, striking and vanishing, always staying one step ahead. Its crew grew weary, but their determination never faltered. Humanity had always survived by enduring, by adapting, by refusing to surrender even when crushed by stronger foes. And that spirit now shone through them, brighter than any weapon. When the dust settled, dozens more Imperial ships were gone, hundreds of fighters lost. The Armada still had overwhelming numbers, but their morale was breaking. Some captains hesitated before following orders. Some crews whispered fearfully about the human ship, calling it a phantom, a demon, a curse. The legend of the Terran Resolve was already being born. On the Eternal Glory, Admiral Zealer stood in silence, his hands clenched behind his back. The losses were staggering, but retreat was unthinkable. He turned slowly, his voice heavy with pride and fury. Signal all ships. Prepare the super dreadnought Imperial Crown. If the human wishes to defy us, then we will answer with the strongest weapon in the Empire. No ship, no matter how clever, can stand against that power. The officers hesitated, but none dared to argue. Orders spread quickly. The Imperial Crown, a massive super dreadnought capable of shattering entire planets, began to move into position. Zealer's eyes gleamed with cold determination. This ends now. The galaxy will not see the Empire humbled by a single human ship. Today we crush this insect once and for all. On the Terran Resolve, Kane watched as the massive form of the Imperial Crown filled his displays. It was the largest warship in existence, bristling with weapons, its size dwarfing entire cities. His crew looked at him with fear in their eyes. Captain, how can we fight that? Kane stood firm, his gaze steady. The Empire believes power alone wins wars, but they do not understand humanity. We survive not because we are strong, but because we refuse to yield. He turned to his crew, his voice rising with conviction. We are the Terran Resolve. We carry not just weapons, but the spirit of our people, and that spirit has never bowed to any empire. Not today, not ever. The crew straightened, their fear fading as Kane's words filled them with strength. Ahead of them, the galaxy's greatest warship prepared to fire. The battle for the future was about to reach its most dangerous moment. The Imperial Crown emerged from the shadow of the fleet, its vast hull glinting in the starlight. It was not just a ship, it was a fortress, a moving world of war. Whole cities could have fit inside its armored belly. Its supercannons could split moons, its engines shook space itself, and its shields were said to be unbreakable. For centuries, the very name of the ship had been enough to silence rebellion. Now, the Imperial Crown faced a single human vessel no larger than a corvette. On the bridge of the Terran Resolve, Captain Elias Kane watched silently as the massive dreadnought took position. His crew shifted nervously, their eyes fixed on the display. The sheer size difference was almost laughable. Captain, said the first officer quietly, that ship, it could destroy us with one shot. Kane nodded. Yes, but size is not strength. We must remember that. The crew held their breath as the comms board lit up again. This time it was Admiral Zayler himself broadcasting from the Eternal Glory. His voice boomed with authority, reaching every corner of the human ship. "Captain Kane," Zayler declared, "you have embarrassed the Empire long enough. You have destroyed ships, yes, but toys compared to the power now before you. The Imperial Crown is the jewel of our Armada, and today it will end your defiance. You have one last chance to surrender." Kane stood tall, his eyes steady as he replied, "No surrender. Not today, not ever. The Empire will learn that humanity cannot be broken." The line cut. The words hung in the silence like a challenge carved into stone. The battle began. The Imperial Crown opened fire. A beam of pure energy, wider than the human ship itself, tore through space. The Terran Resolve twisted sharply, its engines burning bright. The beam passed so close that the ship's hull rattled, but it missed. "Shields holding," reported the tactical officer, though his voice was tense. "But another hit that close and we won't survive." Kane remained calm. "Stay sharp. They are powerful, but they are also predictable. That is their weakness." The Resolve darted forward, weaving between the smaller ships that surrounded the dreadnought. Kane used them as cover, forcing the Imperial Crown to hesitate for fear of hitting its own allies. The human ship struck quickly, disabling frigates and cruisers, then vanishing into the debris. But the dreadnought did not relent. Its weapons turned space into fire, beams and missiles filling every direction. The Resolve dodged and spun, but the attacks came closer each time. The crew fought to keep up, sweat running down their faces as alarms echoed through the bridge. On the Eternal Glory, Admiral Zayler watched with cold satisfaction. "They are cornered," he said. "The net is closing. Soon there will be no escape." Commander Dravik, however, looked less certain. "Admiral, they have evaded us before." "What if—" Zayler silenced him with a glare. "This is different. The Imperial Crown is here. No ship escapes its fire." But as he spoke, the human vessel performed another impossible maneuver. It dived straight toward the dreadnought, weaving through the storm of fire like a shadow. It darted so close that it brushed the dreadnought's shields before slipping away again. Zayler's officers gasped. "They're inside its firing radius," one shouted. For the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed Zayler's face. On the Resolve, Kane's voice was calm, steady. "They rely on their size and firepower. They do not expect anyone to come close. That is where they are weak." The human ship darted in and out, striking vulnerable points with surgical precision. It targeted shield generators, sensor towers, and weapon banks. Each strike was small, but the dreadnought began to feel the damage. Still, the Imperial Crown pressed on. Its massive bulk turned, its engines roaring as it tried to crush the tiny ship. Its main cannon charged again, glowing with deadly light. "They're going to fire," shouted the sensor officer. Kane narrowed his eyes. "Then we make them fire where it hurts." The Resolve dove toward the wreckage field left from earlier battles. Broken cruisers and shattered destroyers floated silently, drifting in the star's gravity. The Empire hesitated to fire into the debris, but Kane pushed deeper, weaving through the graveyard with incredible skill. The Imperial Crown pursued, charging its supercannon. Admiral Zayler gave the order. "Fire, end this." The dreadnought released its full power. A beam brighter than a star shot forward, cutting through the debris field. The wreckage exploded in a chain reaction, fragments slamming into the Empire's own ships. The shockwave spread through the fleet, scattering formations. But the Terran Resolve had slipped aside at the last moment. The deadly beam missed and instead struck one of the Empire's own battleships, tearing it apart in a flash of fire. Cheers erupted on the human bridge. The impossible had happened. The Empire's greatest weapon had destroyed its own ally. Kane did not smile. His eyes stayed fixed on the dreadnought. "They will not stop until they destroy us, and we will not stop until we show them what humanity means." The battle dragged on. The Resolve grew battered, its shields weakening, its hull scorched. Systems flickered and the crew fought exhaustion. But their spirit held. Each time the dreadnought struck, they adapted. Each time they were cornered, they found another path. The Imperial Crown, despite its size, seemed slower, clumsier, weighed down by its own power. It was a beast, mighty but predictable, and Kane knew how to slay beasts. At last the chance came. The Resolve slipped under the dreadnought's belly, dodging streams of fire. Its sensors picked up the weak pulse of the main reactor, the heart of the massive ship. "This is it," Kane said. "One chance." The Resolve fired everything it had. Pulses of energy and missiles slammed into the reactor shielding. The dreadnought roared in fury, turning its weapons inward, trying to swat the insect beneath it. But Kane had one final move. He ordered a sudden burn, dragging the dreadnought's main cannon into alignment with its own vulnerable side. Then at the last possible moment he twisted away. The Imperial Crown fired. Its super cannon, meant for worlds, struck its own weakened flank. The energy tore through its shields, rupturing the reactor. A blinding explosion erupted, shaking the void. The dreadnought shuddered, its massive form breaking apart. Flames and debris spread across the battlefield. The Imperial Crown, jewel of the Armada, was gone. On the Eternal Glory, silence reigned. Officers stared in disbelief as the flagship of their empire exploded before their eyes. Sailor's face was pale, his hands gripping the command rail. For a moment he could not speak. The impossible had happened, the Empire's pride destroyed by a single human ship. Then his voice returned, filled with fury. "This is not over."
"Signal the fleet!"
"Destroy them! Destroy them all!" But even as he shouted, fear had taken root in the hearts of his officers. They had seen what no one thought possible. The Armada was no longer invincible. On the Resolve, cheers filled the bridge. The crew embraced, their eyes shining with relief and pride. Against all odds, they had survived the greatest weapon of the Empire. Kane raised his hand, quieting them. His voice was steady. "We are not finished. The Armada still stands. But remember this. Today we showed them that humanity cannot be crushed. Today we proved that no matter how great their power, we will always find a way." The crew nodded, their exhaustion forgotten. Their captain's words filled them with strength. The Terran Resolve, battered but unbroken, turned back toward the fleet. Alone it faced hundreds of enemy ships. But now the galaxy knew the truth. The Empire could bleed, and Kane was ready to make sure it bled again. The wreckage of the Imperial Crown still burned in the endless dark. Fragments of the dreadnought drifted like shattered mountains, glowing with molten fire. For the first time in centuries, the Empire's greatest weapon had fallen. But the Armada remained. Hundreds of ships stretched across the void, their cannons glowing, their engines burning bright. Each one was powerful enough to destroy worlds. Together they were an unstoppable tide of steel and flame, and against them, there was only one human ship. The Terran Resolve floated silently, its hull battered, its shields flickering. The crew worked quickly, patching systems and rerouting power. Sparks rained from broken panels. The air was thick with smoke and tension. Yet on the bridge, Captain Elias Kane stood tall. His eyes were sharp, his voice steady. "They think we are finished," he said quietly. "But we are not finished. Not yet." The crew looked at him, their faces weary but determined. They had seen the impossible happen once already, and they believed it could happen again. On the Eternal Glory, Admiral Zaylor paced like a caged beast. His pride was shattered, his rage unbound. How could this happen? He demanded. One human ship, one insect, destroyed the jewel of our Armada. None of his officers dared answer. Fear hung over them like a shadow. They had seen what Kane had done. They had seen the dreadnought fall. Zaylor slammed his fist against the command rail. "I will not allow this humiliation to continue. Order every ship forward. I want the human vessel destroyed, piece by piece. Leave nothing." The Armada began to move, hundreds of ships turning as one. The void shook with their engines as they closed in on the lone human craft. On the Resolve, the sensors lit up with hostile signatures. The entire fleet was coming for them. The first officer whispered, "Captain, there are too many. We can't fight them all." Kane's voice was calm. "We don't need to fight them all. We just need to fight smart. Remember, the Empire believes power is everything. They do not understand what it means to be human. That is why they will lose." His words filled the bridge like a shield. The crew straightened, their fear fading. They had seen Kane's strategy before. They had seen how he turned weakness into strength, and now they trusted him completely. The Armada fired first. Dozens of beams cut across space, streaking toward the human ship. Explosions rocked the Resolve as it twisted and spun. Shields flared, hull plates buckled, and alarms screamed. But the human vessel refused to fall. "Damage on decks 3 and 5, shouted the engineer. "Keep us moving," Kane ordered. "They must never pin us down." The Resolve darted between the larger ships, weaving through their fire. It used the enemy's size against them, forcing them to hold back for fear of hitting each other. Several times, Empire cruisers destroyed their own allies in their rush to strike the human vessel. On the Eternal Glory, Admiral Zayler's fury grew. "Useless fools! Do you fear one tiny ship? Surround them! Crush them!" But surrounding Kane was exactly what he wanted. The Resolve broke free into open space, dozens of ships chasing close behind. Kane looked at the star that burned in the distance, a giant sun whose corona flared with restless energy. "Set course straight for the star," he ordered. The crew hesitated. "Captain, if we get too close, they will follow us," Kane interrupted. "And that is where we end this." The Resolve raced toward the sun, its engines burning at full power. The Armada pursued, wave after wave of ships stretching into the light. The Empire believed the human vessel was desperate, fleeing into danger. But Kane was guiding them into a trap far greater than any weapon. Closer and closer the star grew. Its fiery surface boiled, throwing out waves of plasma. Radiation filled the void, battering shields and straining engines. Imperial ships began to falter, but they pressed on, desperate to destroy their prey. The Resolve dived into the corona, weaving through solar flares like a fish swimming in fire. Kane gave precise orders, steering them through deadly currents. The Empire ships, larger and slower, struggled to match the maneuver. Their formations broke apart, chaos spreading through their lines. "Now," Kane said quietly, "we strike." The Resolve turned sharply, darting between two destroyers. Its cannons flared, tearing through weakened shields. The destroyers exploded, their fragments hurled outward by the star's fury. The chain reaction began. Imperial ships crashed into one another, their engines failing under the strain. One by one, they fell victim to the star itself, pulled into its blazing depths. On the Eternal Glory, panic spread among the crew. "Admiral, the fleet is breaking apart," shouted an officer. "Shields are failing, radiation levels rising." "Silence!" Zayler roared. His eyes burned with hatred. "I don't care how many we lose. Destroy that human ship." But even as he spoke, his fleet crumbled. Dozens of ships fell into the star, consumed by fire. Others were torn apart by collisions. The Armada that once stretched across the galaxy was being destroyed not by weapons, but by its own arrogance. The Resolve emerged from the chaos, its hull glowing from the heat, its systems pushed to the limit. Yet it survived. Behind it, the once proud Armada was gone. Only wreckage and fire remained, drifting into the star's embrace. On the bridge, silence reigned for a long moment. The crew stared at the screens in disbelief. They had done it. Against all odds, they had destroyed the mightiest fleet the galaxy had ever known. At last, cheers erupted. The crew shouted, laughed, and embraced. Tears ran down their faces as the weight of victory settled in. Kane allowed himself a small smile. "It is over," he said softly. "The Empire's power is broken. Today humanity showed the galaxy what it means to stand free." On the Eternal Glory, Admiral Zayler stood frozen, staring at the ruins of his fleet. His pride, his Armada, his entire life's work, gone. He whispered in disbelief. "Impossible. How could one ship, one human?" No one answered. His officers looked away, their eyes filled with fear. The admiral of the greatest fleet in history had been defeated not by numbers, but by a single will stronger than his own. The story of the battle spread across the stars. Worlds that had lived under the Empire's shadow for generations heard the tale. They learned that the Armada was not invincible. They learned that a single human ship had stood against the galaxy's greatest power and won. Rebellion sparked. Chains broke. The Empire trembled, and at the heart of it all was the Terran Resolve, scarred and weary but unbroken. On the quiet bridge, Kane looked out into the stars. His crew gathered around him, waiting for his words. He spoke simply, his voice calm but filled with pride. "Remember this day. We fought not for glory, not for conquest, but for freedom. And no matter how vast the darkness, the light of humanity will always endure." The crew nodded, their hearts strong. They knew the war was not over. The Empire would rise again. Battles still lay ahead. But they also knew something greater. Humanity had shown the galaxy that even the smallest spark could set fire to the night, and that spark would never fade. The Terran Resolve turned from the burning star, its engines carrying it into the unknown. Behind it lay the ruins of the greatest armada in history. Ahead lay the future of humanity. A future unbroken, a future free.